Hello, how you doing? I'm Andres Junge from uPort. I'm going to talk a little bit about uPort. This is not the classical uPort talk. It's more about what we think should be the Ethereum identity, what we think identity on Ethereum should be. We've been working in uPort since 3 years now. And when we try to approach the identity problem, we have seen a lot of different use cases and a lot of different definitions of identity. For example, for government, it's all about taxes. They want to have a number for you so you can identify you if you pay taxes or not. I'm from Chile, and in my country, the identity number, it's called tax identity number, so it's basically for that. Corporations basically want to identify their customers and their employees to give them different access to different parts of their system and to track how they pay or they buy things. Classical Web 2.0 companies, they use email, Facebook Connect, logging with Google. That's what they think identity is about. For fintech companies, it's all about KYC. Every fintech company here is facing in almost all jurisdictions all these anti-money laundering laws and terrorist financing laws. So it's basically all about knowing who is working with us or with them. For Ethereum dApps, it's an Ethereum address. They only need to know that. Sometimes they need to know more about who is behind that Ethereum address or who is in control of that address. And for NGOs, it's a form of verification, a valid form of verification. NGOs, mostly identity NGOs, are more focused on refugees because it's hard to track who someone is if they don't have any kind of identity. When we try to approach uPort, we always think about standards. We try to build something that can be used by anyone that is standardized. And you have a lot of different words that the problem we find out, it means different things to different people. So you find that some people think claims are one thing, some people think registries are one thing, attestations, identifier, credentials. You will find all these different words. Sometimes it's the same meaning for different audience, but sometimes it's completely, or there's subtle difference for them. Identity standards. The first identity standards was made by the ITU. It's International Telecommunication Union. It's a very old one. It's a crappy one, in my opinion. The only thing that survives from that is the X509 standard. It's the thing we use for HTTPS, SSL, certificates, all the thing. Lucky for us, the Web 2.0 world came out with OpenID and OAuth, basically for identification or authentication and authorization. And basically, all the solutions right now are built on top of that. Facebook Connect and Google, logging with Google, and all the other stuff are built on top of that. And right now, we're working with something called the Decentralized Identity Foundation. Well, the URL is there. It's identity.foundation, so it's pretty simple. I'm going to talk a little later about that. Okay, there's some key concepts we want to address here. First is identifiers. What identifies someone or something? Because identity is not only for people. It's sometimes we want to have identifiers for other things like IoT devices or contracts, smart contracts, or pieces of land, right? So in our model, or in the DIF model, identifiers are called DIDs, decentralized IDs. Also, an important concept is the claims. Claims are things that someone says about somebody, or something about something. But it's a source make a claim about a target. People also call this reputation statement. And the claim always have a source and always has a target. We make a difference between claims and facts, because facts means that someone verifies that, or the source is verified somehow. I can claim that this audience is great, but it's not verified at all, or, well, probably. So if you trust me or do not trust me, that depends, that makes the claim more valuable or less valuable, right? Another concept we think it's important and we find out it's important, it's a way for asking for identities. The problem right now we're facing is that we have identities, but like the normal identity or government-based identities, are hard to present to a software or to a service. So the flow of how the identity flows from the owner of the identity to the consumer of the identity is something we need to address too. And also how to ask or verify for a claim. So we built uPort. uPort, we built it as an open identity platform. We want to be very open and make it useful for a lot of people. And we build on top of Ethereum. That's why we're in this conference and not in another one. Yeah. OK. These are the key concepts for the uPort platform. First, for us, identity is an MNID. MNID is a concept we defined, which means multi-network ID. At first, we thought, OK, identities can be Ethereum addresses, but then we find out that the same Ethereum address can live in different networks, in different blockchains. We have now 4 blockchains, mainnet and the 3 testnets, but also we find out that people have private blockchains, which makes it more difficult for everything. So MNID, it's a small encoding standard, or it's not standard, but it's something we put it to the community, which encodes the network ID and the address, so it makes it easier to understand if an address is from which network it belongs. It can be used for public-private key combinations, but also for addresses of contracts. We also built a proxy contract. It's optional, but it's a contract that allows people to manage their keys in a better way. We find out that people, first they use their Ethereum address as an identifier, but then if he lost his key, then he lost all his identity and all the claims for that identity. So we thought, OK, let's build a proxy contract that is actually the identity of the user, and then the keys can manage that contract. But it's an optional thing. If you decide to use another contract or another way to manage keys, you can still use the uPort. Also, we built a registry, something we think is a shared space where people can share public information or public claims for other people. And we propose a standard for that. This is the ERC 780. I'm going to talk a little more about that later. The other thing is that we want to use claims. We want claims to be signed by users and verified by other users. So we need to have all the public key infrastructure the same way we used to the old one, but without the certificate authority certifying something. We decided to build a public key infrastructure in a decentralized way. So we propose a way for doing that in a standard way. Also, for requesting claims, or for issuing claims, or for sending claims to the user, and all that stuff, we find out that there's no single easy way to do it. So we defined a messaging system which is JWT-based, which can be signed by identity. So all these JWTs are signed by the identities, which public key is stored on the registry, which allow anybody to check if the ID is the one actually that is signing the JWT. Also, we made a way for requesting standard private data. That way allows users to select which information they want to share. So if I'm a dApp or a service and I decided, OK, I want to ask the name or the birthday from a user, and then the user receives that and he can choose to disclose that information or not. That's what we call selective disclosure. We need to have a really cool flow that allows the user to check who is actually requesting this information and a way for giving that information back to the requester. All these claims, we also find out that not everything should be on the blockchain for privacy reasons and for speed reasons. There's a lot of use cases where people don't want to use the blockchain at all. They don't want to sign transactions. They just, or the contract, there are no contracts involved who wants to check claims or something. They're just users that needs to have an identity that's permanent somewhere. And all the information should flow in an off-chain way. So we built a format, which we call attestations or credentials or, well, badges. We haven't decided a cool name. But still, it's a JWT standard which specs which claims are, which is the format for a claim. And also we are working with the Decentralized Identity Foundation, and they defined a standard for the DIDs, for the decentralized identities, and we built a compliant implementation for that. Okay. Okay, the Decentralized Identity Foundation defined something, the DID, the Decentralized Identifier, which looks like that. It's the ID, method, and the method-specific identifier. This is basically because the DIF, it's a foundation that it's, their members are from everywhere. People from IBM, Microsoft, Sovereign, we, other people from Evernym also. So not all the solutions are blockchain-based. So, and the standard, the DIF standard should support all the methods. So basically, that's the format for it. So our DIDs, the uPort DIDs are the ID, uPort, and the mNID. This is how an mNID looks. It's an encoded Ethereum address with the network. And there's also a thing called resolver. The resolver basically, given a DID, can resolve a DID document or a document of identification attributes for someone. Of course, these resolvers should only provide public information. In case we are asking for private information, then we should do a selective disclosure request. So the DID document contains public claims, public keys, endpoints for more identities. In case I'm storing my information in a secure enclave or secure hub, then I can point my user or the consumer of my information to that point. And of course, there's the resolver who resolves from DIDs to DIDs documents. Well, can you see that? This is our proposal of the registry. This is our version of the ERC 780 implementation, which is basically a registry. It's hard to read, but it's not that complicated. It's just a mapping of mappings. Yeah, but you basically store information for the user, we just think it's only public information. Our resolver, if you want to resolve the DID that it's written down there, basically you go to the registry, get what we call the uPort profile IPFS, which is basically return me the IPFS hash where the DID document lives. So basically, you give that, and it looks up in the uPort registry for the IPFS hash based on the mNID of the user, and returns back. But this same registry can be used to store claims from somebody else, like if the claim is stored on IPFS hash, or if the hash itself of the claim can live there. So it's a multi-purpose registry for storing everything we find that should be public at all. Okay, We always thought that we shouldn't build anything that it's too monolithic, that it's a single thing. We always thought that we should build something layered, that we can change or you can opt in to use some things. So on the bottom is Ethereum. We can build an optional access control layer, and also, as I said before, we can build we can run the uPort proxy contract as optional too. Then we have this mNID, which is mainly the DID, which is the identity identifier. And then if you want to store public information for that identity, you can use the on-chain registry. If you don't, you don't. The public infrastructure relies on this, so if you want to use another way of doing public infrastructure, you can use another way of doing it, even a not decentralized or a centralized public infrastructure. Then we use IPFS for the document, DID document storage, because, well, IPFS is so cool. Kudos to them. Then we have built the DID resolver and the public infrastructure on top of that, and the off-chain claims, which is basically JWTs that are signed off-chain and flows in this system. And we have the selective disclosure flow and all the other messaging flows. We have opened everything except for one thing, which is the mobile app. Not because we don't want to, because it's not ready to be open source, but it's going to be open source soon. But all the layers are we have specified in the documents. We have demo apps. We have different kinds of JavaScript libraries that allows you to read from the registry, write on the registry, deploy contracts, and all that stuff. The main endpoint or entry point for this is developers.uport.me. Our proposal for the Ethereum registry is on the EAP 780, and mostly all of the repo information is on uPort project on GitHub. And of course, if you want to send us an email, just send us to team.uport.me. Or if you want to talk to me later, of course, I'm going to be here. There's also Paul. Paul, raise your hand. Paul is our partner manager. So he can, well, he speaks English better than me anyways. Oh, cool. OK. One last thing before I go to the questions is we started this kind of thing in the Ethereum conference when we have a QR code and people scan this QR code and they receive an attestation that they were there. That's actually not true because it's not really a proof of a presence, but it's a cool thing and people like it. So if you have the uPort app installed, you can scan the QR code and you will get an attestation, an automatic attestation that you have seen the QR code. Because people in the streaming are also seeing this QR code. How this works? Well, basically, the QR code is a selective disclosure request. So your phone gets their request that someone is requesting an attestation, that someone is requesting information from you. Basically, what we are requesting is your Ethereum address, or your mNID, or your DID. And also, we are requesting push notification tokens. So it allows us to send the token or the attestation back to your phone. So yeah, I hope it works. If it don't, just let me know. And that's it. I'm going to leave it through the questions, so you don't need to rush for the scanning. Do we have time for questions? Cool. Thank you.
I'm just wondering with the ERC 780 claim registry, how you store IPFS hashes when they're traditionally multi-hash, which is more than 32 bytes long. I'm also wondering why that QR code is so enormous.
Well, we encode the IPFS hash. We don't store the ASCII codes. We just do a base 58, I guess, encoding, so we can store in 30 bytes, 32 bytes.
Bytes, and then the hash itself is 32 bytes, but then they also have a multi-hash prefix which tells you which hash algorithm to use and so on.
Well, I need to check the code how it's done, but well, we can store it in the yeah. And why the QR code is so big? Because the JWT that we are putting in there is first signed. There's the signature of it, and it's also requesting well. It has the callback URL and also everything else that is requesting. And you can decode it, it's not that complex. You can check. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, it was very nice. I also read the ERC 780 and I commented also on it, and I was wondering, if I read it correctly, you want one contract for every chain, one ERC 780 contract for every chain.
Not really.
Okay.
We are using one for our implementation, but people can use their own. Well.
Yes, because how I see it is it would be nice if there would be one per use case, perhaps, or yeah.
Yeah. If you're a tester and you want, for example, the question that they asked the later talk about how to revoke things, you can use the registry to revoke things. And probably if you are the tester and you want to have your attestations there and your revocations also in your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with different logic, probably.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Alex Movat from Remy. And during DEF CON you mentioned that users don't like to create first their accounts using uPort. So do you think it is better to start implementation from the business side or service side? For example, like crypto exchange will implement uPort and after that offer users to use that system?
I don't think I get the question. So you're basically asking if I think the adoption will go from services asking people to use uPort or people with uPort asking businesses to say, hey, I have uPort, why you implement that?
Yes, because as far as I know, you already, during a few years, developing uPort.
Yeah.
And now user should create account.
We are seeing more people, or I mean businesses, companies, or institutions building their solutions on uPort and telling their users use uPort. We don't have a big uPort user base right now to come to that is relevant to an app. So people build their uPort integration first and then ask their users to use uPort. That's a problem we have. Like my mother, for example, installed uPort and says, okay, what do I do now? Nothing, really. If you don't have a site that you can use, there's nothing to use for it. So, but for example, Zug, it's they build all their attestation system with uPort, and then they ask their users, okay, install this app, because well, they need to store their claims and their IDs somewhere. But they're also building their own app based on this standard specs.
And what about potential customers from traditional economy, not from crypto space? Are you going to work with such companies?
Yes, of course. There's a lot of companies that have show interested in this, not from Ethereum address, or for Ethereum ecosystem, but most from from Web 2.0 places. They only want to use libraries. They don't want to know where the identity is stored or where the claims are. It's just like, okay, as long as I can provide an easy way for people to log in and not managing all the users myself, great.
And one more question. Are you still making authentication with, do you need transaction for each authentication?
No. One thing we decided is that we thought that doing a transaction for every signing a claim or revoking a claim, or, well, revoking a claim, no, but signing claims or showing claims or presenting claims to user, doing a transaction for each one of those operations, it should be very costly. So that's why we decided to move everything off-chain. All the attestations are off-chain. All the selective disclosure flow is off-chain. Right now, for example, you are not, if you scan this QR code, you'll receive an attestation, and that is, there's nothing on-chain on there. There's no transaction involved. Still, if you want to load or store your attestations or some public attestations in the blockchain, you can still use the registry to store there, and there will a transaction be involved.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. I think we have 2 minutes more, or I don't know. Yeah. Over there. You need to have the mic because the streaming they don't get it. Sorry, it's not my rules.
So my name is Nitika. Great work at uPort, firstly. I was just thinking that do we have a KYC, a complete KYC module coming up on uPort? Or are you waiting for developers to develop that and then you integrate with them?
Good question. We are experimented with some KYC solutions in-app that allows you to basically send your information, like your passport or whatever, along with your DID to a provider that will do a KYC for you and issue an attestation back to you. We are still experimenting with that. We don't know if we're going to put it in the app at the end, but everybody or everyone that wants to build such case like Tug or France Connect or everything else, they can do it on their own. There's no need to do it on the app.
Fine, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's it. Okay. Thank you very much.